Okay, so good morning. I want to start by imagining the classroom of the future. So let's just take a minute just to think about what might that be. So imagine that we've got the students, they're sitting in, maybe they're sitting in revolving chairs so that when they're using their experiences, they can turn full 360 to look at things from different angles. Maybe they don't have to take notes anymore because if they need to revisit something from the lesson that they've covered, they can just revisit the experience again later on, maybe on the way home in their self-driving car as they're returning to the campus or returning to their accommodation. There are no books. Books have gone. What about the teacher? What is the role of the teacher now? If all of the content is inside the headset, there is no need for the teacher. There is no need for anyone to present anything. It's all there for the students. They can learn through the headset. They don't need the teacher anymore. So the teacher maybe has just become a kind of tech support person who helps to if there's issues with the hardware. Now, I love technology. It's what I do every day. I'm obsessed by it. I'm really fascinated by it. But for me, and especially because I used to be a teacher, that's a fairly horrific picture of what the future might be. And that's certainly not a future that I subscribe to, personally, and it's not a future that Pearson subscribes to either. So what I'm here today to talk to you about is what my team has been doing at Pearson in these technologies and in these fields, why we think it's important, the reasons that we think it's important, our approach, and what we think the future might hold in the kind of short, medium, and longer term. So, looking at Pearson, I'm the head of Immersive Learning Design for Pearson Immersive. So Pearson Immersive is Pearson's immersive technologies team, and we started out working in vocational education, looking at how we can make more innovative technologies for use in vocational training. And we started out working in 360 video. We produced a range of experiences for training, for example, in health and safety training, using 360 video, interactive 360 video, so that you can look at hotspots and you can interact with those hotspots. Pearson also owns maybe three army training schools in the UK for training army engineers for the British Army and soldiers more generally. And so we started doing some projects with those schools, looking at how we could enhance their training using new innovative technologies. We were then very lucky that we got a partnership with Microsoft to work on the Microsoft HoloLens as Microsoft's education partner for HoloLens. And we started developing apps for the Army School using HoloLens. We started out with an app which allowed the soldiers to learn how to lay out a road. So previously, that instruction involved going out into a field and banging bits of wood into the ground, and we were able to kind of produce a virtual experience for that, where they could use the HoloLens to place various stakes around and learn how to lay out a road virtually. So that was our kind of first app. From that, we've gone on to develop more apps. I'm going to talk about those in a second. I just want to talk first a bit more detail about the work that we've done in 360. So this is taken from our current project that we've just finished, making around about 60 interactive 360 experiences. So this goes along with our textbooks in psychology, sociology, and Western civilization. And this is one of the Western civilization ones on the Chernobyl nuclear plant. The idea really was to make them as interactive as possible with different features that you can gaze at. They open in the headset, they come up, and they give you more information about the nuclear plant. It's got a soundtrack, and it's got embedded 2D video as well. And also things like a timeline. And in the psychology ones, we've produced a range of psychological experiments where you can place the learner within the psychological experiment to understand what's going on. And the sociology ones are more around understanding different locations, like an ethnic enclave or different kind of locations like that. So that's what we've been doing in 360 video. Mobile AR, we've been looking at how we can augment our textbooks again with, so you hold up your phone over an image in the textbook, in this case a heart, and it brings up a 3D model of a heart, which you can then explore. There's a quiz that goes with that. You can explore different parts. It opens up little videos that tell you about blood flow through the heart. Another VR project that we've done is on crane signaling. So this is again for our army school, allowing them to learn how to signal using the Oculus Rift to learn the different signals that are given to a crane driver when they have to move the crane. And that's another kind of more vocational app that we've developed. Then I want to get on to talk really in more detail now about our Microsoft work. So we started by going out into schools and educational institutions and researching what would be the best uses for these, for the HoloLens. How could we really make use, exactly as Cynthia said, of the affordances of the technology in the best way, and did some research with teachers and instructors on that. We developed a range of around 6 proof of concept apps for HoloLens, and we developed those in-house with my team in-house. The areas that we've looked at are chemistry. We've made a kind of molecule builder, which allows you to select the atoms, and it automatically calculates the shape of the molecule. And you can combine molecules together. You can select any molecule or any atoms from the periodic table and put them into the app. And you can upload and download the models that you've made through our content management system, which saves the information of what you've done. And all of these apps are developed to be collaborative. So the idea is that the instructor wears a headset, the students wear headsets, they can all see the same holograms together and work together on the same models. So this is very much to do with instructor-led learning and peer-to-peer learning. It's not about self-directed learning for one person within a headset, isolated from everybody else. Our main product, which I was going to show a video here, but I think it hasn't embedded properly, so I'll just talk about it instead. And you can have demos later on. Later on when I'm doing the demos, you can come and have a look at this in more detail. Basically, we've used volumetric video to film 10 patient scenarios for different patients. And this is to replace standardized patient training for nurses. So the idea is that instead of having to have a simulation center or having to hire in actors to come in and play these roles of these different patient scenarios, we've captured these scenarios with actors. We filmed them in a volumetric studio, first at Redmond, at Microsoft Studio, and more recently in London, at one of the very few of these studios that exists in the world. And it films them using 102 cameras, and then microphones as well, and then captures them from basically every angle. And that creates an enormous file, but a very detailed portrayal of a human, of the person who's been filmed. Then within that, we've got additional information. There's a diagnostic panel that tells you at each stage of the scenario what's happening to the patient. You can move through different scenes. In most of them, the patient deteriorates through the 3 scenes, and you can assess how you think. The idea is that the student and the instructor are working together. The instructor's talking them through the scenario, and they're discussing what's happening next or what should happen next. In some of them, there's a branching element, so the instructor can select different branches depending on the responses of the students. Later on, hopefully, in the next year, we will also be adding in a feature to be able to talk to the patient and ask the patient questions. But at the moment, it's been designed deliberately like that to allow most of the input really to come from the instructor, but to provide a tool for the instructor to use. Alongside that, we also developed our history app, which is for high schools. Allows you to create a virtual museum by placing historical artifacts. We've worked with the British Museum, among other museums, and used their scans, digital scans of their artifacts, and you can place them. You can understand the geographic context. Again, it's a tool for teachers. It's a tool for history teachers who told us that they wanted to have these artifacts available to them in the classroom to use for different lessons. We also got an anatomy app, Hollow Human, which is going to allow to look at different areas of the human anatomy and to explore different, not just the models, but also animations for different pathologies. Oh, that was the last one. So we also developed another one which didn't quite make the final cut in terms of turning into a product, which was for marketing and economics, where you were inside a virtual shop and you could play as a kind of supermarket, and you could place items within the shop, you could price them, you could budget them. Again, this is for high schools. But that's a product we haven't really taken forward at the moment. We just made a proof of concept and decided we thought it didn't at the moment have a huge commercial value, so we've left that for now. Oh, and we've got maths. I forgot about maths, or math, as you call it here. Math app is for geometric models that you can place in the environment around you. So, for example, if you wanted to measure the cubic capacity of a room, you can place cubes in the room, fully scaled meter cubes, and then you can work out count how many cubes fill that room and work out the cubic measurements of that room. That was the first stage. Subsequent to that, we've added in lots more features. We're going to have a graphing feature. We're going to have nets that you can unfold and refold, vectors. So it's going to be quite a lot more content coming up in that app. But at the minute, it's just the geometric elements that we started off with. So that's all the different kind of projects that we've been working on. I just want to say something about our approach. As I've already mentioned, our approach really is to work with teachers, with instructors, to really understand what their needs are and to design things that are going to be useful for them in the classroom. In the psychology app, for example, we worked very, very closely with our lead author on our psychology book, Marin, to make sure that the psychology experiments that we designed, that we worked on, really met the needs that she's outlined in her book, and that it fitted in from a curriculum perspective with what's really useful and interesting. As I've already mentioned, another facet of our approach is really to build tools for teachers. We're not talking, like the description I gave at the beginning, of replacing teachers. We don't see that as the future. We're not talking about students learning in isolation. We're talking about making tools that are useful for teachers, that teachers can use in their own way, just as they have traditionally with all the pedagogical tools that are available. So that's another facet of the way we've done things. And the third branch of how we work is to do with working in partnership. So we've really sought to work in partnership with educational institutions, with other VR and AR companies, and with researchers to really see that we can produce something that just doesn't work just for Pearson, but that moves this market forwards, that moves this AR, VR space into something. Because we believe that with everyone working in isolation, it's just not going to be enough for this industry to take off. So one of our really important motivators is to work with other companies and to see how we can move things forward together. And we've worked not just with companies in the UK, but in the US, in Australia, in China, to really see that we can try and do something globally to move this forwards. So that's a really quick look at what we've done and our approach. I just want to have a look at why we think it's important. There are three areas really why we think, there are three kind of factors for the importance of it. One is for learning, the other is for instructors, and obviously the third is for publishers. So our own self-interest, there is some self-interest as well. If I just look at the learning interest, we think this is important because through the work that we've done, especially with the HoloLens, we think that these technologies have a real importance for visualization. And that's particularly significant when you think about STEM subjects. In order to master a STEM subject, we know that what's really important is being able to visualize in your own head those concepts. And so, for example, if you take the chemistry app, being able to visualize those molecules in your head when somebody says oxygen or when somebody says alcohol or somebody, I don't know, I'm not a chemist, so I'm quite weak in this area. I should have used this as an example. Being able to visualize those molecules is key to achieving mastery of chemistry. And we believe that these technologies, and in particular the HoloLens, really is an interim step between seeing a picture of a molecule and visualizing it in your head. That factor of being able to step into the app, being able to walk around the molecule, being able to move it and look at it from different angles, we believe is a significant benefit in terms of achieving that visualization. So that's the first thing. Another reason that we think that this is important for learning is because of what I call layered learning. I think that these technologies, when I started to really think about this a few months ago, these technologies allow a new kind of learning where you can layer lots of different information by giving inputs to the student from different media simultaneously and then allowing the students to select for themselves which path or which media they follow. And that's, if I give you an example from 360 video, when Anand was talking earlier about the assembly line, he kind of touched on this. So if you think of an experience where you're seeing the assembly line, you've got that image of the assembly line as your kind of background image, and you're layering on top information about what's going on within that environment. Then you're placing on top another layer of sound of what's happening in that environment. You can hear people talking, you can hear what's going on in the environment. Then you can layer on top of that specific features that you want to draw the learner's attention to. So they can be hotspots that they can look at, they open, and they give them text or visual information about that environment. Then you can maybe give the learner the control to change the environment and move to a different part of the plant. Maybe you can give them the chance to walk up to, or to teleport to part of the assembly line and see a specific piece of car engine on the assembly line and examine that in more detail. Or maybe, and this depends how you put the experience together, but maybe you could even give them a chance to be able to move through the actual assembly of very specific parts of the car. So that layering, that power to allow the learner to experience different things within the environment all simultaneously, and then to choose which piece of information they want to look at any one time, is very, very powerful, and I think unique in terms of what we've got now. You might say, well, okay, a 2D video does that. Well, a 2D video is something that's chosen by the director of that 2D video. They choose the learning path that's undertaken in that 2D video. The learner has no real control over that. So I think this is a difference. There is a difference in these technologies. But I think there's an interesting discussion to be had around how much control do we give the learner and how much do we control it. If we produce a narrative type of experience, we control that narrative. But do we want to do that, or do we want to allow the learner to explore for themselves? So there's a whole interesting debate to be had there. For institutions, these technologies allow them to undertake things to achieve some economies of scale. Now, at the moment, the technology is still very... Our Hollow Patient app, we've designed that to help people who can't afford to have a simulation lab in their institution. So this really allows them to take these standardized patients and to do those experiences as many times as they like. It allows students to repeat the experiences as many times as they like. It allows them to spread those experiences across as many students as they want to, and that can achieve economies of scale. And it's the same experiences to as many people as you want, rather than relying on people to come to face-to-face interactions to, for example, view a plant or or undertake a specific piece of technical training. So I think there are economies of scale to be had for these things. Also, it allows us, these technologies allow us to access training in environments that might be very difficult to access or dangerous. And so a good example of that is the work that we've done with London Underground in the UK, producing training for their engineers. They wanted to allow their engineers to experience what it's like to be on a track, they didn't want to take large groups of people down onto the track. It's allowed them to get that experience without actually going there. So again, for institutions, that's very powerful. For publishers, I'm sure none of you are really that bothered what the benefits are here for publishers, to be honest, but we're bothered. So it's about extending our product range. It's about understanding whether we can give benefits to learners that make difference to their lives by really allowing them to experience some of these environments that we can develop alongside the products that we've already got. So for our psychology 360, for example, allowing them to really to feel that they're doing those experiments alongside, studying the work that they're studying in different books or pieces of courseware. And also for Pearson to extend itself as a digital learning company rather than a publisher, to move away from that publishing model and to understand how we can move into the digital realm and really extend our understanding of the needs of learners and institutions in that realm. Finally, I want to come on to talk about the future. What is the future? Well, I'm not going to really stand here and try and predict what the future is like in the very long term because I have no idea. But I was just in the short term, we really feel that the future is going to be the 360 technologies. And the reason for that is because they don't require lots of expensive hardware. They're already a kind of recognized technology that people understand what it is. They allow you to, at the moment there are software already that Stephen, I'm sure, is going to talk about later, allows you to make your own 360 experiences. So, it's being driven from the bottom up. Anyone can kind of get a fairly cheap camera and make a 360 experience. And increasingly, there are going to be software that allow you to, from the film that you've made, to create very interactive environments. So that's good things about 360. As I said earlier, there's some issues, some more negative issues around it, around people taking some of those experiences and thinking that just learners being enthusiastic about them is enough. As Cynthia said, and I heartily agree with, it's all around making sure that you design your experiences for the affordances of the technology. And at the moment, there are quite a lot of things out there that are just designed so somebody goes, wow, and then that kind of fades off after quite a short time. The work that we've done with our Army School shows that although initially they can be very, very enthusiastic, after they become familiar with the technology, that declines. So it's about designing the experiences correctly in the first place. There's also an issue around bring your own devices. So not all schools or institutions have got devices. It's really easy in the tech world to make the assumption that everybody's got a smartphone and it can just plug into a Google Cardboard. That's not always the case. And so that's another issue that we need to overcome. And also, these technologies are difficult to integrate into existing educational systems. So, people are always asking me, hey, HoloLens is great, but how do I integrate that into my LMS? Well, it doesn't integrate into your LMS. It's not that kind of technology. It's not meant to be used in that way. And similarly, Pearson has its own courseware products, and it's constantly wanting to integrate these technologies into existing courseware products. And again, these technologies aren't really built in that way to integrate into a 2D desktop-based experience. So that's another kind of potential barrier to the adoption of these technologies. In the medium term, we think mobile AR will be the kind of key technology, and that's, again, because it's easy to access, it's easy to explain, it's easy to add on to books, or other products or papers. You can just scan something and add it in. Is it actually immersive? Is mobile AR actually immersive? Not really. Not really. It allows you to experience something, but it's still a 2D screen on your tablet or your phone. So that's kind of more of a negative on that side. There is still confusion in the marketplace between QR codes and mobile AR. So, they aren't the same thing. QR codes is really just a trigger for a website. Mobile AR is about designing a whole experience that is adding something to your current environment. And it still costs you at the moment, if you really want to build a very good mobile AR experience, to develop those 3D models. So more and more technologies are coming, which will mean less expertise is needed to design those 3D models. And there's now software you can buy which can turn a CAD model into a 3D model that's ready for these kind of technologies. But at the moment, you still need some expertise to do that. And so until those technologies really come through in more detail, I think it's going to be a while. Finally, in the long term, obviously, we put our bet on the HoloLens and the head-mounted AR type of devices. The reason for that is because, as I already said, it's got these affordances that allow you this visualization to develop. You've got this potential for collaborative learning. Cynthia mentioned isolation. Isolation, actually, I think, is quite an underrated affordance of this technology. In some ways, it's actually a benefit. If you're in a fully immersive experience, you're cut off from the outside world, you're focused entirely on what you're doing with that technology. But obviously, being cut off has the negative of you're not collaborating with fellow students. So we see the mobile augmented as the better option. You are focused, you are cut off to some extent, but not fully. You've still got that scope to interact with your instructor or with your fellow students. So that's really what I wanted to talk about here today. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you've got any questions, we'll be answering afterwards on the panel. Thank you.